This is confirmed by low tracking index numbers in our regular monitoring programs. Mamaku tree ferns are responding very well to the reduction in possum numbers. Previously, this species had been being stripped of foliage, but now plants are looking lush and healthy. It's been an amazing year for kokako breeding. The final count is still to be confirmed. However, monitoring indicates that there could be in excess of 100 chicks, with some birds successfully nesting twice. Higher numbers of tomtits are being noticed throughout the Hunua Ranges, indicating a good breeding season for this species too. Apart from the initial disruption to our park users during the application and track clearance phases, the operation has had minimal impact. Shortly after the aerial application, Southern Regional Parks established a program for 4 young iwi trainees as part of a Manu Whenua trainee program, with a goal of reconnecting Manu Whenua with their traditional lands, the Hunua Ranges. This has had great benefits for the trainees and for the wider council parks team. The trainees have been engaged in supporting the kokako management program with pest control, as well as assisting rangers with track maintenance and other tasks. So that's from the rangers themselves. From the board, we have been and are supportive of the project, have been throughout. I think for me it was a pleasure to be involved with the management team, overseeing the drop. And what was particularly good, I felt, was the fact that iwi and Manu Whenua were involved right from the earliest stages. So, and it was also great that they actually welcomed our presence in advance of an operation, rather than protesting subsequently. So that aspect was really good. And then, as far as the future is concerned, we as a local board look forward to a much brighter future for all of the flora and fauna within the ranges, and if we dare think about it as well, potentially the introduction of kiwi at some stage. So great project, well run. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And elected members, it's just to introduce the report, and we have a presentation for you. So if we can go to slide 1, that's the one. Thank you very much. Have you got Rachel's got control. That's good. That's the best thing. Really, to take you back to the purpose of the report, really is to provide an overview of the operation of the Hunua Ranges and the post-treatment results. So I'll just cover the brief stuff and leave the hero stuff for the people who really have done incredibly hard work. As you might recall, members, in October 2014, this committee approved a change to pest control methodology, and that was in response to protecting the investment of the kokako management area in the Hunua Ranges and the significant ecological values of the largest area of Indigenous forest in Auckland. And in part that was in respect to over 23 years of investment by volunteers, by the councils and by Department of Conservation in that kokako management area. The key decision was, how do we respond to the increasing pest densities in the Hunua Ranges? What we suggested to you, and you agreed that 1080 was the best option at that time and this time for dealing with that issue. It was a change in methodology, and we'll talk about this soon, but that required quite a change in approach in how we engaged our communities in what was a sensitive catchment area and providing Auckland with 65% of its water supply. So most importantly was the need to create an operational plan. At the top of that list was stakeholder engagement and iwi engagement, but also how we would carefully undertake that operation and involve all people along the way in an open and transparent manner. So I think the key part of the operation right from the beginning, and Member Bell has mentioned it, is really the collaboration that occurred. And there's some significant collaboration here in this photo with Manu Whenua Auckland Regional Public Health Service, Watercare, Department of Conservation, the Environmental Protection Authority, but also with you. I'd like to acknowledge the leadership that elected members have shown. And within those organisations, and particularly within our own Auckland Council, there was collaboration across the organisation that I was proud to be part of. That's certainly true. I think the work stream that was established around mana whenua was significant, and that was 7 iwi coming together. I think some of us spent a very early morning for the blessing of the operation, and some of those iwi hadn't been into that area since I think the words were, chased each other around with patu. But it was very important for them to re-engage with that land and understand what's going on in terms of pest control and protection of the Hill ranges. So I'll hand over to Rachel to take you through the operational program.
So I think as Mace has touched on, consultation, engagement and working with others was absolutely an integral part of this operation, but very much so in the early stages as we were starting to shape the operational program. And we were working very closely with a range of different operational agencies, Watercare, the Department of Conservation, having regular discussions with the Auckland Regional Public Health Service, who had a role in providing approval for the use of aerial 1080. But we also needed to work very closely with adjoining landowners. Obviously, being very closely connected to the area that was being treated, we needed to work with them to understand any operational constraints that they had around their properties. And something that also came out of those discussions was the desire very much for a large number of those landowners to be included in the operation. We had to talk to recreational users, commercial concessionaires. There was a process of informing and engaging with schools, early childhood centres, vets, the New Zealand Police, also medical centres. So through that range of discussions we had, we started at a point of looking at the treatment of about 17,000 hectares, which was just the regional parklands. And through that engagement, that grew from 17,000 to about 21,500 hectares. And that was through the inclusion of the Department of Conservation lands that directly adjoin the regional parklands, but also bringing in about 2,500 hectares of directly adjoining private land at the request of landowners. We had an extensive community engagement program that was focused on a range of different mediums to get the messages out. So we used media releases, interpretive signage. We had a stakeholder database, which by the end of the operational program had grown to about 1,800 members. We had regular updates to landowners and occupiers, and about 230 inquiries during the course of the operation, excluding landowners. The majority of those were recreational users just wanting to understand when and how they could recreate within the parklands. Early on in the discussions with the operational agencies, it was agreed that we would take a precautionary approach to the development of the operational program for the operation, and that was really to reflect the fact that it had been some time since 1080 was last applied on council land in the Auckland region, and there was a need to sort of grow the public confidence and understanding of what's involved in these operations. So the operation was designed to manage both perceived and actual risks. Through the discussions with Watercare, it was agreed that we would split the operational area into 2 blocks, which you can see up there on the screen, the green and the blue blocks. And that was to enable the isolation of the water supply. So at any given time, 2 of the reservoirs would always be available to supply, while the other 2 would be closed down during treatment and not reopened until water monitoring had been complete. Unfortunately for us, or in terms of sort of an operational perspective, the 2 largest reservoirs are actually side by side, so that was why you see that sort of odd horseshoe-shaped operational area, so that we could pair up the largest and smaller of the reservoirs to enable that ongoing supply. We were fortunate in that we have very good pest monitoring that happens on a regular basis, and that was able to be used to inform our methodology. And we also had the benefit of being able to work alongside DOC technical experts to tap into their expertise and knowledge. and to look at what had worked for them through the number of operations that they had carried out recently associated with their Battle for the Birds campaign. So we were able to take some of their learnings and apply those to our operation. We landed with a method that essentially involved the pre-feed of non-toxic baits, which are used to attract pests to the baits so that when you use the toxic baits, they're more likely to go for them. We looked a number of times at our sowing rate, and at the end informed that based on our monitoring results. So the ultimate sowing rate was 2.5 kilos of baits per hectare for the toxic baits. One of the things that was a challenge for us, a little bit different to some of the Department of Conservation sites around the country, is that we hadn't done range-wide pest control at all in one go for over 20 years. And so we were dealing with a situation where we had both high rodent densities and also high possum densities, which meant that we did need to look very carefully at those sowing rates. So the operation itself was carried out for the first block on the 21st of August, and then followed up by treatment of the second block on the 14th of September. Through our discussions with landowners and the Auckland Regional Public Health Service, working with mana whenua, a number of different measures were put in place to manage risks. These included the park closures, the exclusion zones around the public drinking water reservoirs. We also worked with private landowners that had drinking water takes to exclude those intake points. We had a very comprehensive water monitoring program that had three facets to it: the monitoring of the public reservoirs, also the monitoring of private water takes, and then in conjunction with mana whenua we had developed a cultural water monitoring program which was focused on monitoring of the streams flowing outside of the operational area that were of cultural significance to mana whenua. All in all, over 300 water samples were collected from this operation. As far as I'm aware, that's the most extensive water sampling program that's been carried out at any one site following a pest control operation of this nature, and not one single sample detected the presence of 1080. They were also taken at a range of different time intervals, right through from 4 hours post-operation, extending out to well beyond that. One of the requirements of the Public Health Service was a track clearance program, and that required the clearance of baits off tracks before we could reopen the park at a number of different time intervals, immediately following the operation, and then several days out, and then another several days after that. And that involved an extensive number of staff. So at any given time, immediately following the operation, I think on some days we had over 50 staff out on site. One of the really important considerations for us during that time was health and safety, and ensuring that staff out on site were able to work in a way that was safe and to get them back home at the end of the day. And despite having that large number of staff out in a range of different environment types, we were able to successfully achieve that. One of the things that was carried out during the operation and also subsequent was an extensive audit of our practice by the Auckland Regional Public Health Service. They looked at things like our consultation process, so they randomly audited our consultation record, so contacted user groups, they contacted landowners to check that we had done as we said we had. They audited our warning signage to make sure we had adequate signage around park entry points. They had staff out on site at our loading operational areas, observing our loading practice and ensuring that that was being done in accordance with industry best practice. And we also had members of the Auckland Regional Public Health Service directly involved in auditing our track clearance program. So just to touch briefly on some of the challenges and learnings, any large operation like this obviously has challenges, and there's always things to learn from them. One of the things that did pose a wee bit of a challenge was the park closures, and that was on a range of different reasons. Communicating the story around when the park was going to be closed and ensuring that everyone got that information was challenging. We used the council's website for that. We used our stakeholder database system. We also directly informed adjoining landowners through text-based email and phone calls. but making sure that every single person that was planning to visit the Hanua Ranges Parkland